אז בניסיון כרגע שההרצאה של אנדריאה תעבוד עם הווליום.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of the session Innovations in the Study of Ancient Shiloh. This paper presents preliminary archaeobotanical results from this site. The material is still under analysis, and therefore the interpretations presented here should be considered provisional. At this stage of the project, the study focuses on several preliminary questions. First, what types of plant remains are represented in the assemblage? Second, which food practices can be detected at Tel Shiloh? And third, what initial observations can be made regarding agricultural practices and plant exploitation in the Central Hill Country. Because the contextual evaluation is still ongoing, this presentation emphasizes the material itself and its research potential rather than definitive interpretation. But even in its preliminary state, the archaeobotanical assemblage from Tel Shiloh provides an important new data set for understanding agricultural practices and environmental adaptation in the Central Hill Country. One important aspect of this project is the relatively large number of samples currently available from the excavations at Shiloh. The systematic sampling of many loci resulted in 599 samples taken from 2017 to 2024. The samples come from strata dating from the Late Bronze Age to the Iron Ages and later periods, including the Roman period. The excavation works and the sampling are still ongoing, so we will get more samples to analyze. The plant finds are recovered through flotation. Here you see the flotation device and the team responsible for the flotation on site, including Dr. Linda Olswig-Whittaker, who is responsible also for the sorting of the plant remains on site. When this is done, the samples are sent to Tübingen to my lab, where I identified the plant finds with the help of a stereo microscope, a reference collection, and reference literature. The archaeobotanical material presented here consists primarily of carbonized macrobotanical remains. It includes cereal grains, pulses, fruit remains, and wild species. As always in archaeobotanical work, preservation bias must be taken into account. Carbonization favors the survival of some plant materials while excluding others, meaning that the assemblage cannot be understood as a complete reflection of ancient plant use. The current study therefore approaches the material cautiously and within the limitations of preservation and sampling conditions. This map here wants to show you why the archaeobotanical sampling at Tel Shiloh is so important. Tel Shiloh is the only site in Samaria that provides archaeobotanical data from the Bronze and Iron Ages and also from later periods. To get a notion of the agricultural practices and food consumption in ancient times at Tel Shiloh, we also need to look at the plant finds recovered during the Finkelstein excavations in the 80s, and we need to integrate the data with the data from the current ABR excavations. Kislev analyzed the plant material retrieved, as I mentioned, from the excavation works of the 80s. Back then, Middle Bronze Age 2-3 and Iron Age 1 layers have been sampled. 7 Middle Bronze Age samples contained about 350 plant finds, mostly crop species including barley, olive, fig, bitterwedge, and some others. In Iron Age 1, 2 silos contain thousands of naked wheat and barley grains. Moreover, 15 silos from Area D, which were dug into Late Bronze Age and Middle Bronze Age layers, contained some grape, lentil, and olive. The current assemblage includes a substantial quantity of botanical material recovered from multiple excavation areas and stratigraphic units. The assemblage yielded 955 identified carbonized plant finds, 832 are crop finds, 123 come from wild plant species. Most remains are preserved in carbonized form, suggesting deposition through burning events or secondary discard processes. The assemblage is currently dominated by cereals and olive, followed by pulses and grape. At this stage, however, it remains difficult to distinguish clearly between storage, processing, consumption, or discard context due to missing contextual analysis, which is still in progress. Nevertheless, the material already suggests a mixed agricultural economy consistent with regional patterns. Barley is the dominant cereal found in the samples from 2017 to 2024, followed by naked wheat, but we know from the Kislev samples that naked wheat was also an important crop in early Iron Age Shiloh. Some kernels could not be identified to species level due to the bad preservation. They are listed here as indead cereals. We have almost no rachis remains, which might be a result of the small sample volumes, the mesh size of the sieves, or the context that were sampled. In addition to cereals, the assemblage also includes pulses. The bitterwedge is the most abundant, followed by the lentil and some seeds of chickpea, pea and broad bean complement the pulse assemblage. Within the pulses, many were fragmented, also resulting in many unidentified pulse remains, listed here as indead pulses. The fruits and collected plants are clearly dominated by olive stones. Olive stones are very robust and easily survive the carbonization and other bioturbation processes. Therefore, olive finds are very common in southern Levantine archaeobotanical records. The grape is also widely distributed at Tel Shiloh. Other than that, there are single finds of fig, some nuts of the Mount Atlas mastic tree, and a pod fragment of the carob tree. Wild taxa are especially difficult to interpret as many of the finds cannot be identified to species level. Most of the finds come from small and medium-sized grasses. These include typical field weeds like darnel grass, wild barley, and ryegrass. Some small-sized seeds of wild pulses like clover were also abundantly found. In general, the wild species point to an open vegetation of arable and fallow land, orchards, and grazing grounds. Although the contextual analysis is still ongoing, the archaeobotanical assemblage already provides some preliminary insights into food practices at ancient Shiloh. The dominance of cereals, especially barley and naked wheat, together with pulses such as bitterwedge and lentils, suggests a food economy strongly based on staple crops typical of the southern Levant. The presence of olives and grapes further indicates the importance of arboriculture and the use of secondary agricultural products, possibly including oil, wine, and dried fruits. At the same time, the assemblage reflects a mixed subsistence strategy combining cereal cultivation, pulse production, and orchard agriculture. However, because detailed contextual attribution is not yet available, it is currently difficult to distinguish clearly between remains related to storage, food preparation, consumption, or secondary discard. For this reason, interpretations concerning specific food practices or communal consumption patterns must remain tentative. Nevertheless, the material already demonstrates that archaeobotanical evidence has strong potential for reconstructing everyday subsistence practices and agricultural organization at Tel Shiloh. For the agricultural practices and the land use, it is necessary to look at the environmental setting of Tel Shiloh. Tel Shiloh is located in the Central Hill Country on a hill in between Wadi Ali in the north, which merges to Nahal Shiloh, and Wadi Musa to the south, which opens into a vast, fertile and plowable plain, which is marked by the cross-hatched drawing. The wadi beds contain fertile alluvial soils, which are marked by the dotted areas in this map. Modern mean annual precipitation is between 500 and 600 mm, enough for traditional Mediterranean rain-fed agriculture without the need for large-scale irrigation. In Ottoman times and in the early 20th century, this region has been under Mediterranean mixed agriculture, including winter crops, summer crops in the valleys, and arboriculture on the hill slopes. On the left, you see the modern view of the Tel and its surroundings. Modern settlement, infrastructure, and agricultural intensification have transformed the landscape considerably, but the environmental framework that shaped ancient farming practices is still clearly visible. The landscape is characterized by fertile valleys, cultivable slopes, and Mediterranean climatic conditions. The archaeobotanical assemblage reflects precisely this environmental setting, with cereals cultivated on the valley floors, pulses integrated into mixed farming systems, and olives and grapes likely grown on the surrounding slopes. The dominance of barley is particularly significant as barley is well adapted to the environmental conditions of the Central Hill Country and relatively resistant to drought stress. Together with the naked wheat, pulses, the olives and grapes, the assemblage reflects a typical Mediterranean mixed agricultural system. The wild taxa identified in the assemblage further suggest an open landscape consisting of cultivated fields, fallow land, grazing areas, and orchards. Although the data set is still preliminary, it already contributes valuable new information concerning agricultural adaptation and landscape use in ancient Samaria. The Shiloh assemblage can already be situated within broader archaeobotanical patterns known from the southern Levant. Unfortunately, there are no other Bronze and Iron Age sites from Samaria to compare to. Other sites from the Middle Bronze and the Early Iron Age are located in the coastal plain, the Jordan River Valley, the Jezreel Valley, and the Judean Mountains. I compared the relative proportions of the main cultivated plant groups from sites which are closest to Tel Shiloh and date to the Middle Bronze Age or the Iron Age I. Storage finds are not included. The taxa were grouped into cereals, pulses, oil fruits like olive and linseed, and fruits like grape and fig to facilitate the comparison. Several observations can be made. First, cereals dominate most assemblages, confirming their role as the primary staple crop throughout the region. This pattern is particularly pronounced at sites such as Afek in the coastal plain and Jericho located in the southern Jordan Valley. Second, Shiloh stands out because of the comparatively high proportion of fruit crops, especially olives and grapes. A similar tendency can be observed at Tel el-Hayat, located in the central Jordan Valley, whereas fruit crops play a much smaller role at several of the other sites included in this comparison. Third, pulses are consistently represented across nearly all assemblages, although their relative importance varies considerably. Taken together, these patterns suggest that the agricultural economy of Tel Shiloh fits well within broader southern Levantine traditions, while at the same time showing a relatively strong emphasis on arboriculture. However, it is important to remember that differences between assemblages may reflect not only the agricultural practices, but also preservation conditions, sampling strategies, and the specific archaeological context represented in each dataset. To conclude, Tel Shiloh provides the only archaeobotanical dataset from Samaria so far that I know. At present, the results remain preliminary and interpretation must therefore remain cautious. The assemblage reflects a diversified mixed agricultural economy dominated by cereals, pulses, olives, and grapes. Nevertheless, the material already offers important insights into the agriculture, the plant use, and the landscape adaptation in the central hill country. What comes next? In September, Linda is joining me in Tübingen. Together, we will look at the archaeobotanical finds from seasons 2025 and 26, including the remains from these nice pithoi, which come from Middle Bronze Age strata excavated this season. The content of these pithoi included charred seeds, as you can see in the image on the right. Also, I want to start a chronological and contextual analysis of the plant data. Also, it is important to incorporate Kislev's plant data from the 80s, so that future integration of contextual and spatial data will allow more refined interpretations. An important avenue for future research will be to explore whether the possible cultic significance of Tel Shiloh is reflected in the archaeobotanical assemblage as well. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions and discussion. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of the session Innovations in the Study of Ancient Shiloh.
אשאל בעברית, מצאת בשבעת המינים זית, תאנים וענבים. אני מבין שאת התמרים אי אפשר למצוא באזור הזה כי זה לא מתאים לאזור, אבל מה עם רימונים? האם מצאתם סימנים כלשהם? כי רימונים הם זרעים שכן מחזיקים מעמד בתנאים קשים.
So I'll try in English. You talk about all kinds of fruits like olives and things, and the question is, what about dates, and if you find any pomegranates that might survive?
Sorry?
So I'll try again. You talk about fruits like olives and, yeah, you don't, can you hear me, please?
Not really, really bad, sorry.
How about now? Okay. Can you hear me now, please?
Yeah, no, it's better, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so there was a question about fruits like olives that you found. And the question is, what about dates? Although it's not the area that they grew, and if you find any pomegranates that the seeds might survive.
No, no dates and no pomegranates. No, not yet.
Okay, thank you. שאלות נוספות, בבקשה? More questions, someone? No. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.